Hello, my name is Nicholas Mbere. I'm a full stack developer from Nigeria. And today I'll be talking with you about a very important concept in JavaScript called the closure. And I will be giving you a practical example of the importance of closures, what closure is, and how it is applied on the web. So here are 3 buttons on my screen. The text in the first button is father, second is mother, third is children. And normally in the JavaScript world, if you would like to interact with these buttons, you would have to give them something like an ID or maybe a class where you can specifically target these elements. Of course, buttons are elements. And so I'll be taking you through how important closures are and how they can be used to solve a complex problem like targeting these elements separately to just using fewer lines of code and at the same time be able to perform the task that would be carried out by any event on these elements. So as a start, the requirement for this course is that you know your way around your computer. You are also familiar with HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. If you're not familiar with these concepts, I would recommend you check out W3 schools, or you check out some online training resources on what JavaScript is, on what CSS is, and what HTML is. So that aside, now I'll take you through the code. This is the HTML basic structure of the page. We just have the HTML declaration, and in the body here we have the container that is housing our 3 buttons, and they both have a data row attribute, and we included our JavaScript here and our CSS there, and here is the CSS styling for the page. We have the button and the hover of the button, and then we also style the container and we centered it. So I'll be showing you these concepts. Let me start by starting from an IIF immediately invoked function. So when my page loads, this function runs automatically. So first of all, var buttons equal to document.get elements by tag name, elements by tag name. And see, we have get elements by tag name, and in this case we're looking for button. Okay, now normally if we are not using the concept of closure, we would have to call the buttons one after another. We can say something like button 1 equal to, then we can call it by class name, button 2 or an ID, button 2 equal to that, button that, and then we begin to write stuff like if button 1 dot on click or button 1 touch event like get element by ID, or button 1 add event listener and all that. So with the concept of closure, we are not going to do that. We are just going to write fewer lines of code that is going to help us interact with these buttons and be able to identify them. So to do that, we assume that we have these collections. So as a good practice, you would like to check if this exists. before you go ahead and perform any operation on it. But for the sake of what we are doing, we know these buttons are going to be available, and so no need of checking if they exist. So let's go ahead and see what's going to happen. So we start by adding an array here, button. Now, because we want to run a for each function here, for each function. So this is going to give this is going to give us collection of HTML. So this is going to give a collection of HTML buttons, and we want to run for each on it so that we can talk to each button. So for each, so we pass an element. Each of the elements, we want to do something specifically. We want to say, when you click on this, any of these elements, we want to say element dot add event listener, and the event listener is click. And when you click on it, we want to run this function, and we want to take that event, and we want to identify which button is being clicked on. And so to do that, there's something called event.target. So let's just alert e.target dot data set. In JavaScript, data set means the data attribute of that particular element, dot row. So we want to know which of the buttons has been clicked on. So you see, instead of we give writing events for each of the buttons, we just have a single outer function, which in return is calling an inner function that is doing the whole of that work for us. In essence, we are doing the work that we could have done 5 or 6 lines of code. We are doing it with just 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 lines of code. So let's save this and run this code and see what's going to happen. So we run it, and we click on it. You see, this is the father. This is the mother, and this is a child. So you see, it's easier for us to enclose the entire of the logic of interacting with these buttons in a single for each method, which goes ahead to give us events that we can interact with those buttons. So in your code, you can do something like switch. Maybe you want to target specific button. You can say switch this, and of course, you can say case father break, and maybe you can do something specific by saying console.log father was clicked on. Father was clicked on. Okay, father was clicked. Okay. So let's save that and see what we have by logging the action. So click on this, nothing happens. Let's open and inspect. So in our distance, you see father was clicked. So we can specifically target these buttons directly without having to call them individually. So that's the importance of closure. You see an outer function. For each is a method that calls a function that calls another function, which in return does what we could have done with a lot of codes separately. So that is the important, sorry, that is the concept of closure in JavaScript practically. So if you read that maybe on Mozilla, for example, and you got confused as to what does this mean, what is closure, or maybe you read it anywhere and you don't know the importance of it, you can see that it's very important in JavaScript, and it's a concept that's been in existence for a very long time. So if you have any questions, you could ask, and I'll take you through. Thank you very much, and we have come to the end of this lecture.